Okay, so I am finally back reviewing Servant. I will be reviewing the rest of the season. This is my review of episode 7, Haggis. So we actually open with a flashback here, and it's of Dorothy sitting in her shower. This is clearly after the accident that we don't really know what happened. She is a mess, and we get a new character introduction in Natalie, the kinesiologist, and we learn she's the one who gave her the fake doll baby to help Dorothy cope with what happened to her real child. So then it cuts to current day where she's with Natalie, and Natalie is giving her this type of therapy. And what's important in this scene is that Natalie gets the news from Dorothy that Dorothy and Sean hired a nanny in Leanne. Obviously, this would freak out Natalie because she knows the baby is a doll. And she's like, well, what the hell? So we're continuing this, but with the nanny knowing too. And she was already now kicked out of the loop of Sean and Julian's plan and how to handle Dorothy's current struggles. Now, what's great about this episode is it's perfect contrast to the last episode in the season where we had Leanne's uncle come, and he's just as crazy as a character you can throw into this house. Even crazier than our regulars. But in this episode, we get Natalie, who's the complete opposite, where she's more sane at the moment to what we see than anybody in that house, and she's a good contrast to who we just saw enter last episode, but she's also a good contrast to everyone in the house and showing you how you can see a different angle where she's like throughout this episode saying Dorothy is sick, she needs help, even confronting head on to Dorothy, and Julian and Sean aren't having any of that. So it's kind of giving you a wake-up call to what you're kind of getting used to and how they're handling Dorothy's mental illness in this house and the story we've seen unfold. So we see, though, in these opening scenes that Natalie hears a baby upstairs, and that doesn't make any sense to her because it should be a doll. How is it making that noise? She goes upstairs, and Leanne grabs her by the back of the hair and throws her to the ground. This is actually a really funny, ironic move by Leanne because it actually helps Sean out too, and I love how they've had this dynamic with Leanne and Sean where in the beginning they were mortal enemies, but somehow, some way they've kind of been helping each other out even times they don't even notice it. So there's some really good character moments here, in particular when Sean gets home and talks to Natalie, and Natalie is saying to him, look, the doll thing was temporary. It isn't a solution. It isn't supposed to be going on this long. And she calls out Sean and says, I think you're using it as an emotional crutch yourself, just like your wife, and you're telling yourself it's real. And she says, we need to wake Dorothy up. What's great about this, it's not only speaking about Dorothy directly in the writing, but it's hitting Sean as well. It's speaking to Sean in a sense in his own mind because he's falling into Dorothy's gaze in the sense of how they look at this, not doll baby, but baby that's not really theirs, and he's actually done this where he's actually getting attached to it, and you'll see that later on in the episode when he's talking about how he won't let anything happen to this baby when he's talking to Dorothy. So he feels that, but in his own way, not even really thinking about how it's affecting Dorothy, how, yeah, I am actually getting attached too, and it is his escape. So on second watch of this episode, you catch much more, and that just goes to how detailed this show is and little hints at everything coming further in the episode, and that happens twice. Once with Leanne here in the bedroom, she's watching Dorothy on the news, and Dorothy's talking about unwanted dogs roaming the streets. And then later we get on the TV feed that Jericho, or so-called Jericho baby, is watching, and he sees on the TV that Dorothy's talking about people being ravaged by wild dogs, and this is an epidemic. So twice they reference these wild dogs, and that it will come later into play. And you could take from this that Leanne, watching that, hearing that in the news, thought up the idea to have a wild dog take care of her problem and obstacle in Natalie. And it also makes you wonder, this baby was also watching a feed of this story. Does it also have some subconscious powers like Leanne? Because this baby was brought into the house by Leanne, so you wonder that as well. So we see Sean has another kind of bonding moment with Leanne. They know they kind of both need each other. They're on the same page about making sure Natalie does not see this baby, and that it makes sense for Leanne to be the hostess for this dinner. I love when Julian comes to the house because a lot of humor just immediately enters when Rupert Grint enters the show. And it just continues here that he's paranoid about that crazy uncle who was in the house last episode, has the private investigator looking into him, not really getting results. And to add to his paranoia now, he's told by Sean that Natalie's coming to dinner. So they both knew Natalie, and Julian now has to face that they've kind of left her out the loop about Dorothy. So I love we always get these creative, fancy dinners by the chef, Sean, and he does the haggis this time. I love the camera point of view shots around this balloon at the table, and we're just jumping between characters' perspectives and being blocked off by the balloon. And inside this balloon is the essence of heather to intertwine with the Scottish heritage of the dish of haggis. And when they pop the balloon to release it, I love the reaction here of Dorothy, that giggle. It's so natural. Lauren Ambrose is killing it in this role. It's such a complicated role to play too. I just wonder where this actress has to be in a mindset and what she should know where her character's going and what she shouldn't, how that all plays out. But the way she's presenting it, whatever she's doing is working. And you see now Dorothy says grace at dinner, and Natalie's like, well, when did God enter this house? So just showing you too that that's really odd to Natalie to see really any of them addressing religion or belief in God, and showing you again how all these main players are affecting each other, and that's the effect Leanne's had on Dorothy slowly, that she's picking up a little bit of a belief system here. So really important scene now is Leanne goes to get a bottle of wine in the cellar. Once she grabs the bottle of wine, the floor cracks. So this is really important to the big end of the episode, which we'll get more into. And you can tell, and you've seen this in prior episodes when Leanne was whipping herself, that Leanne, as a very religious girl, struggles with, she has a temper, she gets angry, she gets enraged, wants to take care of her issues, and then she feels immense guilt about it. And that just happens again in this episode here. Because if we're going through the dog situation, she's the one who caused that dog to come in and plan this attack. And the crack gets explained in that final line of the episode, and why that would freak her out, which we'll get more into. And Dorothy says at the dinner table to Natalie that Sean still can't really taste anything. And she says extreme stress can cause senses to shut down. Again, kind of the voice of reason here, but Sean's like, no, it's just a virus. Which is interesting because you forget too in the situation how like this is also affecting Sean so much, this crazy house they're in and what they're doing. And a really interesting line is Dorothy saying, it feels like it's been so long since we've all been together. And Natalie's like, you know, it hasn't been that long. And Julian and Sean immediately cut her off there and don't want her saying any more to Dorothy. This is really interesting. And any theories you guys have, please write down below, because that's a big curveball they're throwing into all the mystery that's already in this show, and maybe our perception of time and how many days have really passed in this story and what Dorothy's perception is. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. What could that really mean? And Natalie's still going full force here. She's like, I need to tell you, Dorothy, you're not well. But Dorothy doesn't react great to this kind of thing. She feels cornered in, and to her, this almost looks like an intervention. And she's like, I'm healing fine on my own. And this is just one of the best scenes by Lauren Ambrose here, when she's like, I'm a lioness, I'm a Shira. And she just sneaks in that she's happy she fired Natalie. And she's like, I don't want people checking my poop in a microscope, throwing to the line early on that Sean mentioned her going to a certain therapy to check for cancer. This scene was just great. It was powerful and was also hysterical. And I love that Julian's reaction to this. He's getting relief hearing her say that. Like, yeah, who are we to tell her how she should heal? And this just clears his conscience because he obviously is human and feels guilt about this. And that's why he also drinks so much. He doesn't know how to cope with it. And then we got a close call again where Dorothy goes to bring the kid down, wants to show it off, but Sean stops her. And then we see this dog for the first time in the room with the baby. So it cuts though to Natalie outside talking to Leanne. And she's like, how much did those boys tell you about what really happened? And she's like, I was the one they called. They were pissing in fear, so referring to this mysterious event that happened with Dorothy. But Natalie here missteps and tells Leanne she should look for something more stable, and you just see Natalie's effect in this episode coming into this crazy house and kind of calling out situation by situation, trying to break it up. And she sees the best case of Leanne going, but you're just gonna enrage Leanne more. I really thought at this point she would die by the end of the episode, Natalie. It was just all pointing that way. Saying stuff to Leanne like that is so dangerous. But this is where Natalie hears the dog, and then right when she sees the baby is real in that crib, the dog comes out now and goes for Natalie. And Julian literally beats this thing with a wine bottle. And you just wondered, like, Leanne, when she sees this, she's so disturbed yet angered by it and kind of shell-shocked at, like, in a sense, what she's done, I believe. It's kind of a tough read sometimes with her, but that's because she's a complicated character, and it's really cool because there's also the mystery to it, because you don't really know exactly what's going on in Leanne's head at all times. So you see Sean, too, the scene I talked about earlier. This comes into play now where he's with the baby, with Dorothy after the incident, and he's just like, nothing's going to happen to the baby, I promise. And you believe it. He's telling the truth there because, again, he's falling into this rabbit hole of actually caring about this stranger baby. And then Natalie confronts Julian outside, asks about this baby. Whose baby is it? And Julian, the masterful liar here, just says on the spot that it's some incest rape situation type baby. But what Natalie connects the dots to is that Dorothy would think this baby is actually Jericho. And she says this is not what Dorothy needs. But Julian's like, F Dorothy, what about what the rest of us need? When do I get a doll? I love Rupert Grint's delivery of this line. You really felt it here. And it just shows how much he's actually broken by this event too. And that he, again, just masks it all by just keeps drinking wine to his face in every scene we see this guy. And he's like, nothing gets him hard anymore. And then Natalie takes a turn and just lust kicks in for her and they go bone. And there's just nice, interesting cuts here because it's showing them having sex in the cellar. Then it shows Sean and Dorothy embracing each other in the living room. And then it shows Leanne walking with her Bible in her hand, embracing that, just showing you too where these different values lie and what they all kind of in the end really love, with Julian being sex, Sean and Dorothy loving each other, and then Leanne loving her religion. So Leanne actually goes into the coat room where the dog was. Did this dog actually die when Julian hit him and then she brought it back to life? I don't really know. And Julian goes to get his coat and the dog runs out. So I love the ending in this episode. It's just Leanne now sitting in her bedroom watching the TV of a preacher. And he says, but if the Lord creates something new and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them and they go down alive into hell, then you should know that these men have betrayed the Lord. So is this that guilt again, like she was whipping herself in her head now, hearing this because she saw that crack and the floor opening? Was that her sign to her that she's done wrong with this dog attack, feeling guilt for that, and that she's going to go to hell now? It's interesting how that all works. Or you can kind of turn it into a theory maybe too that she thinks they all are eventually going to go to hell for their sins. We don't really know, but I'm leaning towards it. That's kind of still her struggling with her own guilt, and that freaked her out. It's so interesting though. It's a lot of complications with these characters and very interesting characters, and I love that the base is characters and there's great mystery here. I've seen people frustrated with the show in a sense of, oh, we need more reveals already, or this is just dragging, but I disagree. I think it's smart what they're doing and taking their time with the reveals because it's only 30 minutes per episode. So you only got such a short time each week anyway to answer stuff. So you got to kind of look at it too as like, oh, we're down to our last 4 episodes, which really in a regular show is 2 episodes. So you're not going to get as much information in a 30-minute episode, and that's okay. Why rush it? I think what's keeping me interested is not knowing stuff. I hope there's payoff, but I'm in. I'm still hooked. I'm enjoying this. I think this is some really good writing, and it just works week to week to have me come back, be excited, because again, I really don't have much idea what is going on, but I'm enjoying it. And isn't that what matters in something suspenseful and mystery? It's entertaining. The only concern I would have for the season as a whole is that it's already been approved for season 2, which is great news. But I hope they do a separate story and that we actually get an end to this story in season 1. That's where I feel like it'd be dragging out if they extend this to 2. I don't know how you can keep this mystery going that long. It'd be cooler if they do a new mystery and give us an end in season 1. We'll see. But I'm giving this episode in particular a 9. Let me know what you thought of it down below. I'd love to hear all your thoughts, your theories. Let's get the discussion going here. And please make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss one of my reviews of Servant. I'll be reviewing every episode here on out. I do a bunch of other shows as well, movies, celebrity interviews, so you don't want to miss those. And please follow me at Steve Varley1 on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And I'll see you next time.